Hi everyone. Today we are going to look at a classic consulting challenge being broad enough to deliver, but deep enough to be credible. To unpack this, here's the question. Consulting spans so many areas. How do you decide where to go deep versus staying broad? And how does this impact the quality of the service we provide?
Management consulting is very demanding, especially if you're an entrepreneurial type management consultant, where you have to dig up your own work and you're going from company to company. But even if you're an employee consultant, let's say with Deloitte or PwC, KPMG, etc., McKinsey, etc., they're going to put you in various clients and companies. So your energy level must be enormous. You must have enormous energies to be able to travel, live in hotels, go into new people, learn about a new business, and help and then deliver value. So you better find an area of practice that just you love. It inspires you. I was highly inspired by composite materials applied to aircraft structures and the manufacturing of those when I was in my just graduated to early 20s, and I loved it all so much. Um, But I quickly realized, I told you one day I was looking across, this was when I was at the Havilland, and I saw all these guys in the management offices, the production control, and I said to another one, what do they do there? It was production control. And he said, you don't want to know, it's a nightmare. But I did want to know. And it was all about operations management. So my mind saw that, then there was computers, what is it? So I realized I didn't want to be on a drawing board. I told you that before. And I found my way to ABB, ASEA Brown Boveri, where it was I'd gone from contract engineering at the Havilland at Hughes Helicopters in Los Angeles on the Apache helicopter, and then Pratt and Whitney and IBM. These are all contract jobs, but I wanted a permanent because I wanted to learn management, and I knew I could never be a manager until I actually was trained in it. So ABB hired me in manufacturing systems because even I had CAD CAM on my resume, it was still enough that I knew something about computers. So they hired me, and the learning I got at ABB in Mississauga was unbelievable. Power distribution equipment. And there I had a mentor who helped me learn about manufacturing, material planning, master scheduling, bill of materials, writings, capacity planning, shop floor control, inventory control, accounts payable, accounts receivable, general, all this stuff about, but I had no knowledge of. I was a mechanical engineer or a nautical manufacturing engineer. I had no knowledge of all this. And they actually said to me, because I wondered if I made the right decision the first day I was on the job, and they manager, he says, you'll learn more from this than we will. And they were right. I stuck with it. So this one mentor helped me. It was just fantastic. And I became so specialized in the ERP system. I trained the whole company. There were like 400 people. I became the trainer, internal trainer. And Honeywell noted this, and Honeywell hired me 3 years later. So I became manager of people, and that was in sleepless nights. And I was the youngest in the manufacturing engineering group. But it was an unbelievable experience, but it was very stressful. Oh my God, it was stressful because I had to let a couple of people go who, but I had the support of the director of manufacturing who helped me. But anyway, that's another story. But it was all growth, 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 growth. And it was through them that I learned, I was exposed to the real management consultants, because ABB brought in these consultants from one of the big firms to analyze how the implementation was going. So they interviewed me, and I was so open with them that the chief operations officer, the vice president of operations, stopped me meeting these guys again because I was too open. But then I learned what real consulting was. And then I joined Honeywell, and they called me a manufacturing consultant. And it wasn't it was marketing. So I was wearing blue suits, nice white shirt, yellow tie, and I was in trade shows demonstrating CAD CAM systems and the ERP system, the system I was an expert at. But they called me a consultant, but it was all marketing. There was very few sales at the time. So while I was doing this, I started to meet real consultants from Price Waterhouse and Deloitte, etc., Ernst and Young, and saw them give lectures. And I said, "This is what I want to do." And then through the Society of Manufacturing Engineers volunteering, I volunteered to put on lecture shows and computer integrated manufacturing and all this kind of a thing. And then I would meet, and then we collaborated with the American Production Inventory Control Society and also the American Institute of Industrial Engineers, the Canadian branches. And we put on these conferences, and that's where I met real consultants at Ernst and Winnie. It was called Stevenson Kellogg Ernst and Winnie, now KPMG, now Ernst and Young in the US. And that's where I met real consultants. So that's where I got my career started. I went from being a manufacturing systems consultant at Honeywell, which was really marketing, into real management consulting. It was a different world. And the money from my manager job at ABB went from there to there, like 20%, 25, 30%. And then the consulting, another 40%. So I practically doubled within 3 years. But I kept getting the skills. Now, it's an interesting story. Ernst and Young, prior to being called Ernst and Young in Canada, was called Woods Gordon. And while I was at ABB, I went for an interview with them, and the man who interviewed me basically told me, "You're not mature enough." He didn't use such direct words, but he basically, and I'd managed, but I didn't have the marketing skills, the client skills. I was still engineering minded in a command and control structure. And he basically denied me. And I went, oh. 3 years later, the same guy met me again after my Honeywell experience, working in marketing, working with salesmen, and he saw a totally different person. And then he tried to hire me. So I had offers from Anderson Consulting, was called Arthur Anderson in those days, now called Accenture. It was Deloitte, Price Waterhouse, and KPMG. Well, it wasn't called KPMG, it was called Ernst and Winnie. And I joined Ernst and Winnie simply because they were British engineering, like industrial engineering. I could relate to them culturally. It was a great move. And I found another mentor there who's a lifelong friend to this day. He lives in Connecticut. So, and he taught me the consult, and I brought technical skills he didn't have of manufacturing systems. But I wasn't sure what your original question was, but I know that when I look at the notes, I know you wanted to ask about that. How I chose the path? The deep expertise. So because I had deep expertise in manufacturing systems and ERP specifically with CAD/CAM, but especially ERP implementation, like deep, boom, boom, boom. I could go in straight away and command the salary. And then my first assignment, I think it was SmithKline Beecham, the pharmaceutical company, or Eli Lilly, one of them. Oh, I'd never been in a pharmaceutical plant in my life, and I had to learn. And the money they were charging, it was like $150 an hour at that time, was just huge. It'd be like 300. It's like you leaving a job, and they're charging you out at 4 times to 5 times what you're making in your previous job. Like, it was frightening. But these are things that you learn from, and you tell. And even though I call me a senior consultant because I had good deep experience underneath it, you're still young and frightened because you're in front of a client and they're demanding. So my first weeks and months in management consulting was frightening because you're the one they're looking to be extremely skilled. Well, I ramped up pretty fast, but you're learning a whole new set of skills, going from being a functional manager or engineer into management consulting. You're in a different level of performance because you're now the one that they're paying big money to give them results. So if you're a very junior person, you better hope that the guy who's your boss or not necessarily your boss, because you could be deployed to a project, and then you have the client's executive. You hope that you and them have a very good relationship. But these are the early years of consulting, so you want to be humble as well, but you've got to have deep expertise. And they wouldn't have hired you if you didn't have it. Like you're not being hired by these firms if they're not going to be able to use you. So their decisions are pretty good. But you then have to acclimatize yourself to the management consulting practices. My course teaches a lot of that stuff. My courses teach both the skills and about the profession itself. Anyway, go ahead.
Depth comes first and then expand strategically. Thanks for tuning in. Hope this was useful.